As we talked about in lecture, 3D ID is based on a subset of standard landmarks that we used in physical anthropology, that we use in clinical studies for CT scans, X-rays. And the reason for this is because it's easily translatable from traditional craniometrics to geometric morphometrics, which is the new methodology that we're using. The initial set of landmarks that we used in this project was 75 landmarks, and we were able to reduce that in a precision study to 34 landmarks of type 1 and type 2 landmarks that we discussed earlier in the lecture. We have you collect 34 landmarks, but the ones that you are actually entering at the time are 32 landmarks. And these landmarks are based on the standards that the left side of the skeleton is usually recorded. So now we're going to the protocol that we record both left and right sides. But our reference data set, many of the earlier specimens that were collected by myself and some other researchers only contained the left side of the skull. So if you include only the 33 landmarks, meaning you omit the upper and lower borders of the orbit, your reference data set would be much larger. So the first thing that we must do in order to correctly identify those landmarks using a stylus with the digitizer is to mark them with a pencil. Some of the landmarks sometimes can be a little bit hard to see when you're trying to go through with the digitizer. So the best thing to do is just mark with a pencil the 32 landmarks that you will be including in 3D ID. And after we have marked all the cranial landmarks, we are then ready to digitize those landmarks and register them on the computer before uploading them into 3D ID. Now that we have marked the skull with the landmarks on the skull with the pencil, we are ready to register those landmarks or those X, Y, and Z coordinates using the digitizer. You can use any digitizer that's on the market. The ones that we use as a microscribe is what you see here, but they have other digitizers available, and they will work just in the same fashion, which will register X, Y, and Z coordinates. So the best thing to do is to register these landmarks in an Excel spreadsheet. And the easiest way is to write down your list of landmarks in the order that you see them in 3D ID, and then you can just go ahead and mark them along the side, and you will get all 34 landmarks, or 32 landmarks actually, that you will be registering. However, make sure to leave a space, an empty space, for the right upper and lower orbital landmarks, because those will keep the space once you input this into the software. Once you have collected your data in Excel, one thing that I should mention, that if you use a microscribe, you need to use a compatibility mode of Microsoft Excel to collect your data, or your X, Y, and Z coordinates will not register. So now, after you have collected your data in compatibility mode, you will have your landmarks registered on the left-hand side that you typed in, and then on the right you will have a list of coordinates, your X, Y, and Z coordinates on the right. So once you do that, also go in and erase if you did collect your right orbital border, because that will reduce your data set once you import it into 3D ID. So you can see those highlighted on the Excel spreadsheet here in red. We just highlighted just to show you. But if you have any missing values, the one great aspect of 3D ID is that it does handle missing values. So if you do have a partial skeleton or a partial skull or fragmented skull, you can go ahead and collect that data and import it into 3D ID. But however, you need to make sure that you leave those spaces blank to be imported. So once you have done that, copy only your coordinate landmarks. Do not copy your landmark abbreviations. You can then paste them into a new sheet and then save them as a tab delimited text file. And you can go ahead and save that in the same folder that you have 3D ID or on your desktop or whatever it is. It's easier to find. And generally what we do is save them under the case number or name or test or whatever name will make it easier for you to find and locate it. Okay, so once your text file is saved onto your desktop, you can go ahead and import that into 3D ID. So then you would call it, for example, in the case number, make sure that you put your number or your ID on there. And you can process 3D ID based on determining both sex and ancestry, or if you already know your sex, go ahead and process only for ancestry only, as when you add the sex component in there, it will reduce your correct classifications, as that it's more difficult to determine sex across different populations than it is to actually allocate a known crania into ancestral group. So once you have imported that data, you can go into the options menu and select determine sex and ancestry, and also select the groups that you want to compare that unknown set of remains to. And you can uncheck the ones that you don't want to compare it to, or check the ones that you want, or you can choose all males or all females. So once you're set, then all you have to do is scroll down to the bottom. There's a tab called Process, and you depress the Process tab, and it will provide you with the results of the analysis. And it gives you a posterior probability and a typicality. The typicality means how typical or atypical that unknown skull is to the reference population that you compared it to.